Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of an Enchantments-Matter commander deck with Sythis Harvest's Hand as its general. Sythis Harvest's Hand hails from Modern Horizons 2 and is a 1/2 nymph for Selesnyan colors. That's 1 green and 1 white mana. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we draw a card and we gain 1 life. Our general has a very manageable mana value of 2, which allows us to cast her multiple times each game if needed. Since this is a Selesnya build, we are afforded the opportunity to utilize some of the most powerful enchantments in Magic, and each time we cast one of them while Sythis is on our side of the battlefield, we draw a card and we gain 1 life. For the purposes of optimizing our general's ability, we will inundate the core of this build with enchantments, Enchantments-Matter cards, and enchantment payoffs, with our enchantment synergies providing us with sustained tempo and oodles of resources. We will overwhelm our opponents on the path to imminent victory. For the purposes of redundancy, we begin the core of this build with some Sythis-like triggered abilities. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, Enchantress's Presence, Satyr Enchanter, and Argothian Enchantress draw us a card. Mesa Enchantress and Verduran Enchantress follow suit and allow us the option to draw a card, which I'm pretty sure we'll do. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, Sigil of the Empty Throne creates a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Celestial Ancient puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Hallowed Haunting creates a white spirit cleric creature token whose power and toughness are each equal to the number of spirits we control. As an additional ability, if we control at least 7 enchantments, creatures we control have flying and vigilance. Reaching the 7 enchantment threshold should be easier than Sunday morning in this build. Now let's add some cards that reward us each time an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, which should happen quite a lot. Cetessan Champion and Eidolon of Blossoms draw us a card. The champion also gets a +1/+1 counter, while the Eidolon triggers her own card drawing ability. For some creature token production whenever an enchantment comes into play under our control, Archon of Sun's Grace creates a 2/2 white Pegasus with flying and gives all Pegasus creatures we control lifelink. Ajani's Chosen creates a 2/2 white cat, and if the enchantment that came into play is an aura, then we may attach it to the token. When Historian's Boon or another non-token enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 1/1 white soldier. Also, whenever the final chapter of a saga we control triggers, we create a 4/4 white angel with flying and vigilance. With a slew of resource-providing enchantment-specific cards at our disposal, we now turn our attention to creating layers of security between us and our opponents. Ghostly Prison prevents creatures our opponents control from attacking us unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking. Sphere of Safety kicks up the protection several notches. Creatures cannot attack us or a planeswalker we control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments we control. In this build, Sphere of Safety may prevent our opponents from ever attacking us. Flickering Ward is an aura that enchants a creature. When it comes into play, we choose a color and the enchanted creature has protection from the chosen color. This effect does not remove Flickering Ward from the creature if we decide to choose white. We may also pay a white mana to return Flickering Ward to our hand. We could cast this aura, enchant it to a creature, and return it to our hand multiple times during our turn. Through this dynamic, we reap numerous benefits from the enchantment-specific triggered abilities showcased earlier in this video, in addition to providing the enchanted creature protection from a color while it's attached. Swift Reconfiguration also is an aura. It has flash, and we enchant a creature or vehicle with it. Enchanted permanent becomes a vehicle artifact with crew 5 and loses all other card types, but its abilities remain. In a pinch, we can cast Swift Reconfiguration targeting Sythis and protect her from creature removal by turning her into a vehicle artifact. In this scenario, our opponent's creature removal spell fizzles or misses, and Sythis becomes a vehicle artifact with her card draw and life gain abilities still intact. We can protect all of our other enchantments by giving them Shroud with Sterling Grove and Greater Auramancy. The Grove also has an enchantment-specific tutor ability, and Greater Auramancy extends its Shroud enablement to include enchanted creatures we control. Privileged Position gives other permanents we control hexproof, while Destiny Spinner prevents our creature and enchantment spells from being countered. It also has an activated ability that allows us to pay 3 and a green mana to have target land we control become an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments we control. It's still a land. In this build, Destiny Spinner is considered a win condition due to its activated ability. Although it does not provide a true protection in the form of Shroud or Hexproof, Karmic Justice provides protection in the form of Fear. Whenever a spell or an ability an opponent controls destroys a non-creature permanent we control, we may destroy target permanent that opponent controls. If an opponent destroys one or more of our enchantments, we could, in turn, choose to destroy the same number of lands that opponent controls. Like we said earlier, protection in the form of fear. Now let's include some additional Enchantments-Matter cards. Serra's Sanctum taps to add white mana equal to the number of enchantments we control. Sanctum Weaver does the same, but we choose the color of mana it produces. Idyllic Tutor allows us to search our library for an enchantment card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. Plea for Guidance does the same, but we can search for 2 enchantments instead of 1. Enlightened Tutor extends its tutoring ability to include artifacts as an option, but puts the tutored for card on top of our library instead of in our hand. Calyx, Destiny's Hand, has 3 different enchantment-specific loyalty abilities. We can look at the top 4 cards of our library and reveal an enchantment card from among them and put it into our hand. We can exile target creature or enchantment we don't control until target enchantment we do control leaves the battlefield. Or we can return all enchantment cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. Speaking of returning enchantment cards from our graveyard to the battlefield, Replenish adds redundancy to this recursive dynamic. Brilliant Restoration does the same, but also extends its recursive effect to include artifacts as well. Open the Vaults returns all enchantment and artifact cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Caution must be exercised when deciding to cast this spell. We must be aware of what is lurking in our opponent's graveyards before we choose to cast Open the Vaults. For a repeatable enchantment-specific recursive ability, we can pay 1 and a white mana and tap Hall of Heliod's Generosity and return target enchantment card from our graveyard to the top of our library. Helm of the Gods gives equipped creature +1/+1 for each enchantment we control. Ethereal Armor does the same as an aura, and also gives enchanted creature first strike. All That Glitters gives enchanted creature +1/+1 for each enchantment and artifact we control, while Ancestral Mask gives enchanted creature +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr, also has enchantment synergies. Her power and toughness are each equal to the number of permanents we control that are spirits and or enchantments. With flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires, Catilda could be a massive threat on the battlefield. She also can be a massive threat from our graveyard. We can pay 3 and 2 white mana to pay Catilda's Disturb cost. If we do, then it enters the battlefield transformed into Catilda's Rising Dawn, an aura that gives enchanted creature flying, lifelink, protection from vampires, and +X/+X, where X is equal to the number of permanents we control that are spirits and or enchantments. If Catilda's Rising Dawn would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, then we exile it instead. If any of these equipment or auras are attached to Sythis, then we do have the potential to one-shot an opponent with lethal commander damage. Now let's bring this video to a close by including some additional cards that synergize with and enhance our Enchantments-Matter theme. Reducing the casting cost of our enchantments allow us to gain and maintain tempo by getting them onto the battlefield ahead of curve. Starfield Mystic, Herald of the Pantheon, Cloud Key, and Jukai Naturalist reduce the cost of our enchantment spells by 1. Starfield Mystic gets a +1/+1 counter whenever an enchantment we control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield. We gain 1 life from Herald of the Pantheon whenever we cast an enchantment spell, and Jukai Naturalist has lifelink. Heliod, God of the Sun, is an indestructible enchantment creature that is only a creature when our devotion to white is at least 5. Our devotion here is factored by counting the white mana symbols in the mana costs of permanents we control. Heliod gives creatures we control vigilance, and his activated ability is a solid mid to late game mana sink in this build. If we pay 2 and 2 white mana, we create a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token. As enchantments go, Rancor may be the best aura in Magic's history. It gives enchanted creature +2/+0, trample, and it only costs 1 green mana to cast. Of greater significance is that when Rancor is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we return it to our hand instead. It's the aura that keeps on giving our opponent's headaches. Generally, in building around series videos like this one, we leave mana ramp, removal, and disruption spells in the hands of each individual deck brewer. However, we would be remiss if we failed to include these enchantments in our Enchantments-Matter build. Utopia Sprawl can only enchant a forest, and when it comes into play, we choose a color. Whenever Enchanted Forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of the chosen color. Fertile Ground does the same and can enchant any land. Wild Growth follows suit by adding 1 green mana, while Overgrowth adds 2 green mana instead of 1. For removal and disruption, when Oblivion Ring enters the battlefield, we exile another target non-land permanent. When O-Ring leaves the battlefield, we return the exile card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Journey to Nowhere does the same, but it's limited to targeting only creatures. When it comes into play, Banishing Light exiles target non-land permanent an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. Lignify is an aura that makes enchanted creature a 0/4 tree folk and loses all abilities. Darksteel Mutation turns enchanted creature into a 0/1 insect artifact creature that has indestructible. It loses all other abilities, card types, and creature types. Kenrith's Transformation draws us a card when it comes into play, and it turns enchanted creature into a 3/3 green elk and loses all abilities. Song of the Dryads turns enchanted permanent into a colorless forest land. These auras are helpful in disrupting our opponent's sides of the battlefield while providing us with some of the aforementioned enchantment-related rewards. We'll thank ourselves, but our opponents may not. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of an Enchantments-Matter commander deck with Sythis Harvest Hand as its general. Removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for crafting the core of an Enchantments-Matter EDH deck, in addition to providing ways to optimize this theme. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.